Good morning and welcome to Wednesday Mornings with Doug. Doug, how are you today?
Very good, Tammy. Very good. And how are you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for asking. Well, today we have two questions from our audience. And our first question is to Doug. Does a buyer have any recourse if an appraisal doesn't seem accurate, especially being if it's appraises too high?
Interesting question. Appraisals are interesting, and just what are we talking about when we're talking about an appraisal? Normally in the real estate business, we're talking about an appraisal for a loan. Is the property worth enough to, for the loan to be secure? So, for instance, if I buy a house for $1 million and I'm going to put $200,000 down and borrow $800,000, it's an 80% loan. The lender's going to want to know that their loan is secure, because if the property's really only worth $600,000, they've got a lot of exposure there. But a lot of people don't really understand how an appraisal is done in our business for a home sale. We think about an appraiser gets an order to appraise a house, and they go out and appraise that house, look at comparables, and build a case for the house, look at replacement costs, do all of this stuff, take pictures, and really use a lot of information. And they're going out to establish a value, but they're not going out just from scratch to establish a value. What they're doing, when an appraiser gets an appraisal request from a lender for a loan purposes, it says on there what the purpose is and what the purchase price of the house is. So they're not going out to just start from scratch and establish a value. They're going out to see if this house is worth the $1.2 million that the buyer's paying for it, and they try to justify that. So he's going out, he or she, and they're looking at the property, the comparables, replacement costs, the rent to value ratios, and all of that sort of stuff that they try to figure, and then say, is this property worth the 1.2? They aren't just starting from scratch. And if it's not, they'll come in with a lower appraisal, and then we need to deal with that. We'll talk about that more in a second. What they generally don't do is come in over the price. They're going out to see if it's worth 1.2, and it's kind of, yes it is, or no it's not, and here's what it's really worth. They occasionally will, sometimes they do that, where they'll come in and paying 1.2, and they'll appraise it at 1.3. Well, guess what? That causes problems for everybody. The buyer didn't need that, and that's not going to help them get in with any less funds or anything else. So it doesn't really do the buyer any good. And look at the seller now, has negotiated a $1.2 million price, and now you get somebody, an outside quote expert, who's saying it's really worth more than you sold it for. Now you got an unhappy seller, thinks that he or she didn't get enough for their house. So thankfully we don't get appraisals over purchase price very often, but when we do, it can be a problem.
So would that be grounds for the buyer to be able to back out of the transactions should they choose?
If they got a low appraisal, well, it depends. The purchase agreement defaults to that the sale is contingent upon the property appraising for the purchase price. Now the problem is, in this hot market where we're competing with other offers and you're trying to make the best offer you can, a lot of times we counter that out, or the initial offer says, no, it's not contingent on appraisal. So if it doesn't appraise, we're prepared to make up the difference. And boy, you better be careful, because in that instance where I've got $1 million listing, you bid it up to 1.2 and thinking you're going to put $200,000 down, but it only appraises for $1 million, you're 80%, now you're going to have to come up with another $200,000, and you better have it, or you may be in default.
And then you could possibly lose your deposit.
And your deposit could be at risk, yes.
Oh, wow. That's very good to know. Well, thank you for that question, Doug. And our next question is an agent required to disclose family relationship to clients in dual agency?
Interesting question, and we kicked it around a little bit before. As a general answer, yes, they are required to, and whether it's dual agency or not, it is a disclosure issue. If I'm an agent representing a seller and I'm a direct relative of that person, even if it's not a dual agent situation, I need to disclose that. The question becomes, what is a close family member? And I don't know the answer to that. I'm not sure anybody really does. are they close enough to make a difference to where you've got some real familial connection there that the other parties should know about. So again, in agency, in any kind of dual agency or single agency, first obligation is fair and honest dealings to all parties.
Right.
So just because I'm only representing one side doesn't matter. I need to disclose if it's a close family member. But again, what is a close family member? I don't know. Obviously, my brother, my sister, my parents, my children are direct relatives, and that would obviously be disclosed. But what about a first cousin? What about a second cousin, third cousin? How far out does that go? And I'm not sure there's a direct answer to that. I think the answer would lie in was that a close enough relative to make a difference in the advice and in the way we handled ourselves in the transaction.
I think that was well tackled. Way to go. Well, thank you, Doug, so much for answering these questions for us. And we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday. Thank you, Doug. And
thank you, Tammy.
you're welcome. And you guys
That was
have a
fun.
great day. Bye.